All right, we're back. Welcome back to the Illinois Wrestler Podcast, College Edition. We just finished up. It's Monday after the NCAAs. I'm with Brian Swaw. How are you feeling on this Monday after that exhilarating NCAA finals?
Yeah, it's the Manic Monday. It's the depression after the excitement, and I don't know that we've ever seen an NCAA tournament with that much excitement and that much chaos. Right? There was so much chaos going on. It just made for the whole weekend, the finals, the appearance by the president, Elon Musk, and all that. I mean, it was just a great showing. Philadelphia was fantastic. The fans were wonderful, and what a great day for our sport and a great weekend for our sport, Dalton.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it was from upsets, number one's going down early, and then, finishing guys like, Penn State finishing with 10 All-Americans, Nebraska getting second place with 3 in the finals, two, just, yeah, it's just a crazy, crazy team race. It was a great team race. I kind of am jealous that I wasn't there because I know whenever there's a great team race, and on Friday, I think, right, there was still speculation on whether or not Nebraska could close the gap, right? But then Penn State does what Penn State does, and they win almost everything in the wrestlebacks, and they have 10 All-Americans. So how impressive is that?
10 All-Americans and set the all-time point record, which they set a year ago, and it's still a disappointing tournament from their perspective. As the semifinals rolled around and one guy was going down after another for Penn State, you're like, okay, well, Starachi's going to get in the finals, right? Josh Byrd gets in the finals, and it was amazing what they did and what they can continue to do. The thing that impresses me the most about Penn State is not that they're so good and they win everything. It's when their guys get beat, and their guys got beat this year more than they had in the past. They're constant professionals. They shake their hand like, okay, no problem. And you don't see any running off the mat or anything like that. So we just, Penn State's Penn State. And I think it's one of those things that we talked about before. It's like, okay, we know Penn State's Penn State, who's taking second. And to your point, Nebraska and Oklahoma State were locking horns back and forth for a while. And then Nebraska pulled away with it with just an incredible Big Ten showing, and then rolled right into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, the team race was interesting too because obviously there was a moment where even the Illini were ahead of the Iowa team, and yeah, was that Thursday or Friday. There was just so much chaos in the team race.
Yeah, it was. They were ahead of them for a while, and I posted a thing on Twitter. Me and Jacob Warner were going back and forth. I'm like, hey guys, he's like, you're going to finish not higher than Iowa or higher than Illinois. And then I sent him a picture, and it lasted like 18 minutes, right? Yeah. So it was good fun, but the Illini came in and had a great first day from their perspective, but okay, Penn State finishes first, and they were expected, but it was still a little disappointing of how some of their guys finished, even though they had 10 All-Americans, which is crazy to say. But then Iowa, who finishes fourth and has 3 guys in the final, everyone's talking about the demise of Tom Brands. Is it Tom Brands' job after finishing fourth with 3 in the finals? It's crazy, but that's the expectations of those programs.
Yeah, there are high expectations, and I think, rightfully so. Those coaches set those high expectations, and that's what they are, trying to do. They're trying to win, and you can't be satisfied with second, third, or fourth. I mean, that's just what we're, that's the makeup of a wrestler is never being satisfied. And but yeah, so just thinking about the finals. Well, I mean, obviously we start with Carter Starachi versus Parker Keckeisen. There's a little bit of controversy as to why he starts the night as opposed to finishing the night. What are your thoughts on that little situation?
Well, I'm glad this is hindsight, because if you'd asked me before Saturday, I would have said that was the craziest thing ever. But ESPN and the NCAA got it right with how they ended it. So, I mean, the sport needs something catchy, needs something to get viewers in that maybe don't watch it all the time. So starting off with someone that could set history, maybe you bring people in. And he didn't really say too much about it one way or the other. But, it's hard to sit here and criticize it because I know the outcome of the last one. Right. Yeah. But it was good. It was a good way to start. And then he makes history in a very good match. And, then we start rolling into the regular matches, 125, 133. And, that's where, but the finals I thought were fantastic for the most part. A lot of back and forth, a lot of real close matches, and a lot of good matches. One of the matches that I really enjoyed, and I know we'll get to it a little bit, but I love the O'Toole and Hamidi match. Not only from the build-up, and they had wrestled earlier 2 weeks ago, but that was one I was really looking forward to, and see if Dean could seal the deal finally after beating Haynes and then wrestling O'Toole, who he just lost to. And so that was a really good one. And then you get to the last one, right? It's like Gable Stevenson, who hasn't lost in who knows how long. It seems like when he come out of high school 7 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was 2019 that Justin Bosch said
Yeah,
it was
and
his
he
last
lost
loss.
in the finals as a freshman, and then he wrestles and wins, and then he leaves for a couple of years and comes back, and it's just, he's not losing, right? This is the last match. Here it is. No one's really even given him a match. He's never been threatened, and history is set. And I thought one of the best quotes, I think it was by, it might have been by Justin, and he said, what about a performance like that in front of your future boss?
Yeah.
The commander-in-chief. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't think you could have scripted that any better. I think hindsight is perfect because we know how the show ended. So the show ended perfectly. I did think that, when you're in the building, when people make history, four-timer or somebody who's doing something undefeated season or whatever, it is kind of nice that they get their flowers at the end. Everybody gives them a standing ovation. And I wasn't there, so I don't really know how the crowd received the fact that he was the crowd is a wrestling crowd. So the television crowd is different than the in-person crowd. And I could understand that you want to give him his due, right? Of like, wow, that's an unbelievable accomplishment. But at the same time, I think ESPN kind of got it right because they started the show with people who we were anticipating. I was so excited to watch that first match, and I was glad that it was a great kickoff to the finals, because I know personally that the finals are always good. And this was just like a great way to start it because it started the energy right away. And then obviously at the finals, or the heavyweight match, literally you could not script it. I couldn't go to sleep because I'm just texting people absolutely insane. Every single person we just can't fathom how good Gable Stevenson looked. And it's not that Wyatt didn't look good. He beat Kirkfleet in the semis, but then we go, oh, was Kirkfleet hurt? Right? We have all these thoughts, and for him to wrestle the way that he did and to fight that hard on that first takedown, I thought that was the difference maker, because a lot of people don't recognize that when you scramble like that, when you're a lightweight, it's not that big a deal. You just get up and you keep wrestling, and the next one's good. But when you're a heavyweight and they had that scramble, both of those guys became instantly exhausted, and they weren't going to recharge their battery that quick. So that little flurry that happened in the first period, where Wyatt Hendrickson dived through leg passes and doesn't give up the takedown, that is the most critical position that happened. I think that set the tone for, okay, this is going to come down to a takedown. And then I cannot believe how strong Wyatt Hendrickson has to be to finish that high crotch on a stopped shot like that. It takes guts, and it takes it takes belief that, again, I was telling people, it's like, we don't realize that his coaches were brainwashing him all year. He was brainwashing himself all year. He truly believed that he could win. And in that position, he proved that he truly believed in it. And so that was like, it was freaking awesome. Yeah, I was pumped about that. But
yeah, the thing that happened is when he gets that takedown, there's still like 30 seconds left. And Gable Stevenson is like stunned. Like he doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I always bring up different sports analogies, but it reminded me when the United States was playing Russian hockey and they're beating them, and the Russian team doesn't remember. They don't know how to pull the goalie because they've never been losing with 2 minutes left in the game.
Yeah.
And he seemed stunned that he was on the bottom.
Yeah.
And just a great finish, and he couldn't have scripted it any better for the NCAA and Wyatt Hendrickson and David Taylor's inaugural NCAA tournament with Oklahoma State and what he did and what he's building there. And man, it was fantastic to witness all of it over 3 days, and they're steamrolling. I mean, they're gaining popularity. You mentioned it, some mainstream media, and then Gable Stevenson in defeat is on the most popular ESPN show. Now, I do have a question with that. Is it because ESPN broadcasted the whole tournament this weekend, so they sucked some of those guys into it, or was it Pat McAfee wanting to do it and promote it? Because we've seen more people in the mainstream media today than we ever have in the NCAA. Gable Stevenson, Hendrickson, Starachi, they were on Good Morning America, all kinds of stuff. So it was great to see, but just wondering what the ESPN influence on. I think you have an opinion on that, don't you, Dalton?
Well, I do think that there's I think there's always ESPN influence, right? If a network has the broadcast rights, they want to use their ancillary properties to kind of boost that potential, right? So they have a reason to get these guys on there. But I think Gable and Pat just have a relationship due to the WWE relationship and the fact that he was part of the football conversation. And it sounds like he's still part of the football conversation. He said in the Pat McAfee interview, he said that he had a couple coaches or a couple programs reach out to him after that are still potentially interested. So football is very much an opportunity still. And obviously ESPN, the UFC, and WWE, they all have a lot of, connections when it comes to broadcast rights and stuff like that. So I think all the verticals align to put Gable in the light, and I think they actually have a relationship. But then I didn't see the other interviews, but obviously Wyatt Hendrickson has a whole different vertical because he's part of the Air Force. He wins in dramatic fashion in front of the President of the United States, who is the first sitting president to ever watch the NCAA finals and I think that's awesome. I think that's great for the sport. There's a lot of talk around it, but I think anytime we get the most famous people to come watch our sport, I think that does nothing but great things for us. I even think I think they got a bad seat. If I'm running the tournament, put them in front row, let them see what it looks like. I saw them over in the corner. They're stretching their neck. It's like, no, they put them on the side, man. I thought they kind of got shafted when it came to the seats.
I think they set him there more for the pictures afterwards, when the guys walk by.
True.
But Wyatt Henderson, new Captain America, right?
Yeah.
The new Captain America. That's what he is.
Yeah, and if he would have lost, he would have just been still the Farva guy from Super Troopers. But I think he's graduated to Captain America. And again, shout out to the Oklahoma State. I think again, they're doing so many good things. They have successfully woken the sleeping giant of Oklahoma State University. I've been waiting for a couple of years for that program to kind of get woken up. I've talked to people. I said that program's nobody understands the brand capacity that program has, and to get David Taylor and Jimmy Kennedy and Thomas Gilman and Caldwell all to kind of take over that program and do what they did this year. I think Penn State has a worthy competitor. I think they have somebody, and then obviously don't neglect to talk about Nebraska. They had 3 in the finals, 1 champion. They did the best they could, and it's great to see. I think even though Penn State had 10 All-Americans, I think the new landscape of wrestling, I think 8 to 10 All-Americans is going to be the norm for select programs. And I think that's the goal. I think these select programs have to find a way to get 8 to 10 All-Americans and 3 at least in the finals and multiple champs. And the scoring record is going to continue to get I think the scoring record kind of might not get challenged, because if there's more people with 8 to 10 All-Americans, then it's a little bit more tight, right?
Yeah, I mean, it should be, but I just want to say, the people obviously listened to the podcast from a couple of weeks ago because I was banging the table for, either Mark Manning or Mike Poeta to be the coach of the year. And they gave Mark Manning wasn't the Big Ten coach of the year, but he was the national coach of the year.
Yeah.
So kudos to that program. And selfishly, I look at what Mark Manning's done in Nebraska and kind of the rise of it. It's something we can talk about, later on. But I think the Illini and Mike Poeta can emulate what Mark Manning and them did, because the state's strong enough. But that's for another time. But I'm glad people listened to the podcast and heard us, Dalton.
Yeah, no, they did. And obviously they made it easy for that. They showed up. But speaking of that, so the state of Illinois probably has one of the best national tournaments in recent memory. They have 3 individuals from the state of Illinois make it to the state or make it to the national finals. Vincent Robinson at 125, Mikey Caliendo at 165, and then DJ Hamidi at 174. 2 of them walk away with titles. I don't know when the last time 2 Illinois natives have won national championships in the same year, but yeah, what's that say about Illinois high school wrestling?
Illinois wrestling has always been in the upper echelon, but there's been this stigma that, like, hey, they never go out and they don't produce All-Americans. They win Fargo every year. They're great competitors, top recruits, but they don't produce All-Americans. Well, hopefully that stigma's over. And sticking at 125, we were hoping we would see, Robinson, Littledell in the semis. That didn't happen. Littledell gets upset by Seymour. And then we were thinking, okay, well, now we're going to get an all-Illinois final between Ramos and Robinson. That doesn't happen. And then Vincent Robinson goes out there and seals the deal against Spratley. And to your point about how tough Illinois wrestling is, Vincent Robinson never won a state title in high school. Never won a state title. Finished, he lost to Coderhound, right, who placed from Illinois at 141. He lost to Lemley 2 years ago, who's at Michigan and had a COVID year. So he doesn't even win a high school state tournament, wins the national championship. And it was just so great to see for Vincent, and his family. I've been around him forever. And what a performance. And kudos, to that staff out at North Carolina State. They have another incoming freshman coming in, Will Denny, a top recruit. He's heading out there. So, hey, North Carolina, and this goes for Tony Ramos too. Stay away from our Illinois guys. They're supposed to stay home. And then, Ramos finishes his career, 4th. We finally get that Littledell and Ramos match. It's a 2-point match. Matt goes for, a takedown there at the end and gets pinned. But what a tremendous career. First time, I think they said, in over 19 years or 20 years that Purdue's had a 2-time All-American. So, right off the bat at 125, you have 2 guys from Illinois, a national champ, and then a 4th place finisher in Ramos.
Yeah. And then going into 65, Mikey Caliendo, he loses to blinking by my brain.
Mitchell Messenbrink.
How do I forget the name? Mitchell Messenbrink. And the Big Ten finals was a lot closer, but this one kind of was pretty controlled by him, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, like I said before, it's like Mikey Caliendo is the second best wrestler at this weight class, and if he was at the weight class below or above, he probably wins it. No disrespect to anyone else, but he's that good. But Messenbrink might go down as one of the best 10 wrestlers to ever wrestle at Penn State. I mean, he's that good. So, the match was 8-2. But Mikey went for an inside trip at the end. He was going to go for it, battled it. But it's just a tough go when you have Mitchell Messenbrink out there who's, I think he's average points in a match were 16. That's what he scored all year. But how about on the backside? Kid that takes 10th in the Big Ten at 165. In Trevor Chumley, right?
Oh, yeah. Don't forget about him. Yeah, at
well, he's at 157. I'm sorry.
But no, bring him up. I mean, he needs to be told. He didn't get qualified to the NCAA tournament. He gets a wild card, and he's in the semifinals of the national tournament. I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
Well, I mean, there you go. Like, it also tells you how tough the Big Tens are.
Yeah.
Here you are, Trevor Chumley gets an at-large bid, finishes 10th in the Big Tens, comes back and makes the semifinals. And he wrestles Blaze, who upsets Kasich.
Yeah.
And, on the bottom side, you got, Taylor upsetting Shapiro. and you get an all Big Ten final, but Blaze and Chumley wrestle a 4-2 match. And, how crazy it would have been to see Trevor Chumley make the finals. And I'm like, okay, well, here it comes, right? The semi slide. That's what generally happens. And then Chumley gets on the backside and wrestles another Illinois kid, Vince Zerbin, from the University of Northern Colorado.
Yeah.
At that weight class, you get Chumley who takes fourth and Zerbin, who takes sixth. And I said earlier too, that 157 to me, with the exception of the first two guys, it was chaos. And everyone had Shapiro and Kasich in the finals. There was no question, but then the other ones were so hard to pick. But man, I think everyone, including myself, slept on Antron Taylor because what a dominant tournament he had.
Yeah,
I wasn't impressed with him in the finals. He had that first takedown, and then he ran most of the match. But that was crazy. They have two place winners at 157 on the backside that no one thought was even possible.
Yeah. I made the mistake earlier. I think I said Nebraska only had one champ, but they had two champs. But with the Chumley thing, I'll have to reach out to my buddy Joe Rao and find out what they told him or how he made the adjustments, because he obviously showed up to compete at that tournament in a way that he didn't at the Big Ten. And I don't think he did throughout the season, because he wasn't on the radar throughout the season. But that, again, what I love about the sport of wrestling is it's the great equalizer. It's a game, it's a 7-minute game. And as long as you have fight, you have a shot. And obviously you need a lot of technical abilities, and you need a lot of, just general understanding of certain positions. But if you have fight, you can win. And he showed up and he did a phenomenal job. So kudos to him. I definitely think he's worth mentioning. And, Nebraska or Northwestern is going to have a couple kids that are, they had a freshman this year, state champ or runner up last year, but he's going to be, he's going to be good. So Northwestern's got a few that are going to be looking for next year. But then going into 74, DJ Hamady, he wins against Keegan O'Toole. What a match, right? Like, he kept wrestling through the position. He gets to the scramble, finishes on top, and dramatic win. And it was just a great match.
Yeah, I like to step back to that semifinal match against Haynes. That one was a little bit more anticipated because they hadn't wrestled yet. And, DJ, in DJ fashion, who we've seen him wrestle 1,000 times, hits that famous Hamady ankle pick on Levi Haynes, to open the scoring, and never looked back. Just never looked back. And I thought, the telltale sign in that O'Toole match was in the first period when Keegan had Dean's leg in the air for over a minute and couldn't score on him.
Yeah.
To your point earlier about the scramble with Stevenson and Hendrickson, same type of situation. You have him you have his leg up in the air, you have a high single, and you don't score for a minute. Not only do you burn a bunch of energy, but it's demoralizing too. It never scored a takedown. In that match, I thought there was a couple times when Dean came close to a takedown, and they really let reaction time play out for the national champ. And rightfully so. But it was so good to see Dean Hamady, never redshirted, 4 years out of high school, completes his 4 years, and wins a national championship. Now, I don't know how many people, and it would have some due diligence, but that generally hasn't happened in COVID and anything since, this has been going on for the last 5 or 6 years. So kudos to him. Just turned 21.
Wow. He's really still young. And what kind of decision making did he have the knowledge of? He went to Oklahoma State before David Taylor was hired. So I don't know if he had a feeling, but he made a good decision to go be a part of that program. But yeah, to win and in the way that he did, he had to beat 2 national champions to do it. It's just impressive finish. And I think it's a great sign for high school wrestling in the state. I think you alluded to it. You got Will Denny. He's going out to NC State to join Vincent Robinson. You got Mendoza, he's going to Mizzou. There's a lot of positive things for high school wrestling in the state of Illinois, and I think that as time goes on, they're going to continue to become, NCAA champs, All-Americans, and we're going to be talking about them for years to come. And that being said, what I'll call is the adopted the adopted son of Illinois, Lucas Byrd, NCAA champion at 133 pounds for the Illini. Man, he just kept fighting. He had more fight in that match than I've seen in a lot of people. He did not want to lose that, and he didn't lose. And he could have been, arguably he could have got the stalling call earlier. He didn't. The ref was really, really tentative on trying to call that. Kudos to Lucas Byrd. Kudos to the Illini staff. Kudos to Jeremy Hunter. He's like, the GOAT of all lightweight wrestling. He is so successful with coaching the lightweight guys. So, yeah, great job, Illini. What do you think about Lucas Byrd's?
I think we look at Lucas Byrd's journey. That big pin gave him a ton of confidence at the Big Tens, and then he rolls in as the number 1 seed. And then we're watching this first match against Hunter Leak, and it's like, what's happening, right? And he wins 3-2. Then he rolls in his next 2 matches, and then he wrestles Seth Romney, and I'm watching this match, and I'm like, that Romney's like the tallest 125-pounder I've seen in a long time. And, Lucas is short and stocky. And I was like, man, he getting trouble. And he wrestled a smart match. It was a 2-0 match. He rode him out. And I don't know what happens if he doesn't take down. But, and then he gets to the finals. And to your point, and to the dismay of Iowa fans and my newfound Twitter friend, Jacob Varner, right, is from Iowa, is that Lucas pushed the pace the whole time. And not only do I believe a stalling call should have been called earlier, I also am firmly believe, and even DC said it on the broadcast, I mean, what's a takedown? That was clearly to me a takedown.
On the edge, yeah.
Yeah, on the edge. And I don't know what else, but to his credit, to Lucas's credit, and Poeta's staff and Jeremy Hunter, Lucas never got frustrated by that non-takedown call. Never got frustrated by that non-stalling call. And to your point, he just kept pushing. And the reason why I mentioned that 3-2 Hunter Leak match is because you want to call your shots, right? But I also think there's an arrogant part of things too. And we're always going to be critical from an Illini perspective with Iowa guys. And Drake Ayala says, hey, I'm so glad Lucas Byrd made it. I didn't want to make the finals without seeing him. And he got off to a slow start, and I was just hoping he was going to make it. And yeah, sure, call your shot, right? I get it. But, Lucas wins that match and, runs over and jumps into his girlfriend's arms, who DC, she's over 6 feet tall. And that's why I mentioned Seth Romney. I mean, Lucas is, I guess, used to the taller people, right? So runs over there. And that's the talk of the first 30 minutes of the broadcast.
Yeah.
Is Lucas Byrd and his girlfriend. So fantastic to them. And just so good. I mean, first finalist for the University of Illinois since 2018. First champ since 2016. That was Isaiah Martinez in both of those situations. So, for Mike Poeta, his first national champ. And hopefully that vaults him, and continues to build that program like we both believe in and both think it will happen.
Yeah. And speaking of before we get to the rest of the team, Lucas Byrd has another year. And that's the interesting thing. There's a little speculation. I watched the podcast with Bosch and Willie, and they were alluding to the potential possibility that he might not be in Illini next year. So we'll have to figure that out and talk about what that new world is going to look like when guys win national titles and what that means to how to keep them at the program and stuff. But before we get to that part, I am looking forward to him coming back next year to see him wrestle and try to defend his title. But, Illini, they had a phenomenal Big Ten tournament. The national tournament was really another good tournament, but they didn't have the blood round that they wanted. Just talk me through kind of the blood round matches and how those guys kind of finished out the season.
Yeah, I mean, you go into the blood round matches and you look up the matchups, right? You got, Cannon Webster and Gavin Drexler, 25th, 26th seed. You got Braden Scholes, who's wrestling a mean. They're 9-11. And then you got Edmund Ruth, who's wrestling Donnell Washington, who was another former Illinois wrestler that was an All-American and the first All-American for Angel Escobedo at the University of Indiana. Harvey Twister, Donnell Washington gets it done to the dismay of Edmund Ruth. And then Luke Luffman, who I just thought Luke had and we'll kind of go backwards to forward here, but I just thought Luke had the toughest seed of any Illini wrestler to begin the tournament. I just didn't like his draw. I didn't like that he fed into Schultz and then kind of doing the backside. I'm like, this isn't going to be good. He's going to have to go through two wrestlers that had beat him in the past, just one to get to the blood round and then one in the blood round, just how it was playing out. So he wrestles, the Rutgers guy who beat him in overtime. He beats him, and then he gets Heimelsman, from Michigan. And that might have been one of the best matches that Luke Luffman wrestled all season long. And I don't understand, you have to look at how overtime works, but it was just a tough situation. I thought Luke pressed him the whole time, had him a couple times on takedowns. Heisman had him a few times, but just didn't get the outcome he wanted. But I thought Luke wrestled incredibly well. Stepped down to Edmund Ruth. He's wrestling Donald Washington, who I haven't seen him lose to him. I've seen him beat him a few times. Just thought, going into that match, that's one that Illini kind of had chalked up as a victory. And to your point, man, these matches are tough on the backside. Ruth falls into that blood round match, right? And Donald Washington's already rolled off 3 consecutive wins by the time he gets to Ruth. So he has momentum and confidence and came right out, hits him with 2 blast doubles, and, and that was it. Extremely disappointing. Then you get to the Scholes Amin match, and Braden Scholes is pressing the veteran, pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. And I looked at that match and it went into overtime. I thought for sure that, Scholes should have probably got a stalling call earlier against Amin, but the guy's a 4-time All-American. You're not going to do that. And then they get into overtime, and Scholes is dictating the pace and takes a bad shot, and the veteran capitalizes. So my heart was broken for Braden. And then you get to Cannon Webster, who, finished the second at the Big Ten. Wrestles love it, which, the same outcome, just a little bit bigger gap. And then he gets in the blood round. It's like, okay, no problem. Cannon's gonna win this match, an All-American. And then, something happened real early in that match. Cannon had a takedown. Drexler escaped. They reviewed it for about 5 minutes, and then they took the takedown away. And it just seemed like Cannon just could never overcome that situation. And really disappointing for Cannon and U of I and Mike, because, that was one All-American we thought we had in the bag. And if you just get one more, you probably go from 10th to 7th. And if you get 2, you might even be cusping on 6th or 5th there. So didn't get the result. But then to have Lucas Byrd win the national title, it kind of made everything all better the next day.
Yeah.
A little long-winded, but that was kind of the breakdown.
Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely is icing on the cake to have a national champion, but obviously people are still wanting more, right? So, do you know who's returning from that Illini lineup?
Yeah, so there's a lot of speculation. Lucas Byrd has another year of eligibility, which you had mentioned. So we might have to start a GoFundMe here on Illinois Wrestler to keep him around. So the hope is he stays. Danny Pacino actually has another year eligibility, but the talk is that Danny's graduated, getting his graduate degree. He's ready to move on. But I'm sure Mike and the guys would love him to stay, but I would say that's less than 50-50. Then you're going to roll into 149, which don't see Cannon. I think Cannon Webster outgrew the weight by the end of the year.
Yeah,
I think it's an interesting decision. I firmly believe that 57 and 65 are probably the 2 toughest weights in the country. And maybe throw 74 in there. So, but I just think the weight cut's probably too big. So 49 is an open spot for the Illini. Then you got Webster, Scholes coming back. You'll see the reemergence of Chris Morgan, who redshirted this year, who was a national qualifier from a year before. And then you got the talented redshirt freshman Colin Kelly will probably squeeze somewhere in there. Dylan Connell, who actually sat behind Edmund Ruth this year, but those in the room, Dylan was a national qualifier a couple years ago. Him and Edmund battled back and forth all the time, so Dylan would be a great person, to get back in the lineup. And then, Luke Luffman's in the same situation as Danny Pacino. He had a medical red shirt, and he was so close to getting that All-American. Does he have enough left in him to want to come back, the local kid? I'm sure Mike and his staff will do everything they can to get Luke and Pacino to come back. But you mentioned this, Dalton. It's such a grind, and now you're talking 6 years and just grinding and beating on your body. Are they willing to do it? And not so much from a physical standpoint, but mentally, are you there? One good thing, the rumor mill is that the Bronagles, who, yes, they are done with NCAA eligibility, but the talk is they want to stick around at the RTC and wrestle Greco for Medlin and the Illinois RTC. So fingers crossed that those two guys stick around. But things are in a positive, really positive for what Mike Poeta is building there.
Yeah. Mike has a lot of momentum going into the next season. He's got a lot of recruits coming in. I know they just signed a 25-pounder four-timer from Wisconsin. Obviously, a couple Illinois kids. Aaron Stewart. I don't know. Aaron doesn't come this year. Be next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he'd be a senior next year. So it'd be the year after that. So yeah, he's gonna have to look and see if he's got to go to the transfer portal or look at trying to get these younger underclassmen ready to go right away. I know obviously Chris Moore is a big talk because I think he got a little bit bigger this off season. And so that's going to be interesting to see him come into that 84-pound weight class. So yeah, I mean, right. He's 84. He'd be coming at 84, right?
Yeah. He wrestled 84 at the Indianapolis Open and looked really good and really filled out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think Chris could get back down to 74, but he's a good weight cutter and always has been. So, wherever they want him, I'm sure he fills in. But Chris really looked good at 84. I wouldn't put it past Chris to wrestle 97 at some point in his career.
Yeah, he's thick.
He's really thick and he's, got a great body on him. And so I really look for Chris to be back in the lineup. And that, that will all depend too on how things play out. There might be an open spot somewhere between 65 and 74. Scholes is not a small kid either. Scholes is a big kid. So it'll be interesting, but the line are going to have a young team next year. And, if they can get Byrd to come back and maybe Luffman or, if Luffman's not there, you have Peter Marinopoulos who won some crucial matches the year before, but he's still filling out as a heavyweight. But good things coming, to your point. Not a big recruiting class in 2025 and kind of planned by Mike that way, it seems like, to see what would happen with the roster cuts and if there were portal kids that were interested. But their 2026 class is shaping up right now as a top 5 class with Aaron Stewart, Wyatt Medland, Jackson Penovich, talk of Minaretto. Heard another rumor that haven't verified yet. So please, Illinois people, don't take this this didn't come from the University of Illinois, but I heard there's a strong interest in a Marmion 2-time state champion, a lighter weight kid. You guys can figure that out. And then also the Rainey boys have really strong ties. Their coach wrestled at Illinois. And so that would be
who's their coach?
Go ahead.
Who's their coach?
God, I can't think of his name, but he wrestled at Illinois for a while, and they bring him down sometimes. Okay. They're always around, and man, that would be the class, and that's the one Mike's banking on. So he's halfway home. They just got to seal the deal with the rest.
Yeah, and again, behind the scenes, hopefully he's figuring out the whole new rules. We'll definitely touch base when we find out about the roster cap and how that's going to kind of play when it comes to some of these teams. And then obviously on top of that, just the battle of the NIL space and getting creative and figuring out how you can make it make sense for some of these really good Illinois kids to stay home. And then maybe even some of these, 5th year guys to stick around and give it another go. That's a whole nother can of worms that they're all going to have to figure out, because obviously, You look at Iowa, and Iowa had, you could say some of it was a bust, but they got Mikey Caliendo and Buchanan through that whole transfer situation, and they've been in, you know, they're national champion and national finalists. Obviously, Michigan's got some transfers coming. So yeah, there's a lot to the college wrestling game. But I do want to finish up with just what we kind of started with this about the sport never being in the public eye quite like it was this weekend and specifically today in the news cycle. But what is it going to take for wrestling to kind of transcend and become maybe I don't want to say mainstream, but maybe a more popular sport where there is really a lot of um, financial opportunity for these athletes.
It's a great point because you've seen, like we talked about, in the public eye today, more so than it's ever has been. And Trump he wasn't the president at the time, but he was in Tulsa a few years back. And, but now being the president and being there, and Elon Musk, it got a lot of play time, which was great. The problem is, and please, I'm a wrestling fanatic. So don't take this wrong for anyone out there listening, but it's a tough sport for non-wrestling people to watch for a long period of time. Uh, we understand the scoring. We understand riding time. We understand all that, all of us wrestling guys. But for the average person, there's a lot of subjective things that happen. Is that a takedown? Well, it looked like a takedown, but it was a takedown last time, but not this time. So I had some friends that are non-wrestler friends who are way down on my list, just so you know, as friends, Dalton, right? Non-wrestler ones. But,
Yeah.
they're calling me like, hey, what's happening? Why is that happening? And so it's a tough sport to transcend on TV. But, you brought up a really interesting point when you talked about Pat McAfee. And then you'd mentioned something about, the UFC and Dana White and now ESPN is tied to them. I think you're onto something with that, Dalton.
Yeah. I mean, I think what the most important thing is when interests align, the world moves. And when you think about the MMA, again, on the Pat McAfee show, again, Pat McAfee is really connected with two audiences, football audiences and the WWE audience. And then he obviously is very, simultaneously kind of connected to the UFC. The WWE is owned by TKO own WIMG. They all own the UFC. Gable even said the best opportunity for amateur wrestlers is the UFC. It's the MMA route. And I think when you really think about it, it is a pipeline of tremendous amount of talent. And the thing about MMA is it's not just about talent. It's about the spectacle. It's about exposure. And so I think NCAA wrestling is the greatest opportunity for individuals who are looking for a professional avenue in combat sports to get the maximum exposure boost before they get into that arena. Obviously, the kids that are big enough that can do the WWE stuff, again, their personalities kind of have to work out with it as well. But they have that avenue. And then, I just think ESPN, as long as they're involved with all of those other ancillary sports, they're going to be motivated to continue to boost the credibility, right? ESPN is in basketball, but basketball is not feeding any other thing other than basketball. So wrestling is in a unique position that I think it is a feeder program, if you will, for the big MMA promotions. And so I just think that when I hear Pat McAfee talking about wrestling year after year, it's not his main talking point, but the fact that he's talking about it, the fact that he's supportive of it, the fact that he wants it to be in the center stage. He was specifically saying if it was not on this weekend, he wants to be there. He literally said that. And so, we talked about how, when powerful people push organizations to change the way that things are been done. I think, like you mentioned I think off air before we got started, you can't have the NCAA tournament at the same weekend as the NCAA basketball kickoff. I had multiple text messages from people saying that they were watching the national finals on their phone because they lost the vote and they were watching basketball. And I said, you're on vacation with the wrong group of people. But at the end of the day, we're all competing for that limited window of entertainment attention, and wrestling has to know their position, and we have to adjust. Right. And we might not be able to move the entire season, but like you said, there's a free weekend. Let's bump it. Let's get it in that slot. If you have to move the conference tournaments up, then do it. If you have to start the Big Ten season and the conference season 2 weeks earlier, do it. If whatever we have to do it. There was enough available time throughout the season where guys weren't wrestling. I mean, Penn State didn't go to a tournament all year. We don't need to extend it. We can make it short. Obviously, the shorter it is, probably the less injuries we would have, and just put the NCAA tournament in a position to captivate as many people as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And the biggest thing to do is get it off that March Madness weekend. And as Shane Sparks coined it, March Madness. Have March Madness kick off March Madness the following weekend. There's a week between all the conference tournaments, the NCAA. The old wrestling historians will say, hey, they need that extra week, which is fine. But there's so much downtime in college wrestling. The Illini didn't wrestle for 2 weeks before the Big Ten tournament. Then they had another week off. So there's all different ways to do it, but you cannot kick off. If you want to grow the sport and you want people that are non-wrestling people taking interest in it, you cannot have it when basketball's going on. You just can't. So that's the first thing. And now that ESPN maybe sees a value in it, they'll have a big say in moving it. Yeah. They're the ones paying for the rights. Those are the ones who are broadcasting it. So to your point, I think it's great. And now the UFC being involved, maybe they want to get out in front of it. Maybe they want to do some things, but we might be a little ways away from it. But you have to capture and you have to stay on top of all the momentum that's happening. And I think it's a great point. But now, what do we do for the next 6 months, Dalton? What do we do? You're going to have to preview teams. We're going to have to preview all the colleges, transfer portal. But one point I want to bring up to you, because I thought about this when you were talking about David Taylor and, now that Penn State has some new competition. So I think about the hiring of David Taylor and what it cost and how crazy it was that he took that job. There's no way John Smith leaves and David Taylor comes in. But there's a lot of other David Taylors out there that are coming up through the ranks. And two that I can think of off the top of my head is Kyle Dake and Jordan Burroughs. Does Jordan Burroughs want to coach? Does Kyle Dake want to coach? And if these other teams see the success that David Taylor has with no coaching experience, is that fair to say? I mean, really no coaching experience other than wrestling experience, right? To get a guy like Kyle Dake or a guy like, Jordan Burroughs to come in and coach your program and run your program, is that something that there's a lot of older coaches in the NCAA? Is that a trend that's going to happen? I could see it happening in the next 2 to 3 years, that those two guys end up in a similar situation where no one thinks the coach will ever leave, and it happens.
Yeah, no, I do think I think the current landscape of college sports is going to change the way universities stick with their coaches, and that's going to be for good or for bad. It's going to be a little bit of both, right? There are programs that have great mentors and great leaders, but they're not going to be the best marketers. They're not going to be the best recruiters. They're not going to be the best when it comes to organizing the things that current landscape requires. I did post something earlier this week about, I do think colleges need to stop looking at just credentials alone. I think David Taylor is a phenomenal anomaly, and I do think that he had the ability to keep Jimmy Kennedy, who has been an assistant coach at Northwestern, Penn State, and a few years before he was wrestling at Michigan under Bourmet, and he was in that system over there. So I think he's been blessed with a great support staff to help him. He's been completely in the world of marketing. I mean, David Taylor started the Scrap Life. He was one of the the more popular kids in college sports and high school sports. Right? He was popular throughout high school wrestling. I think Colin Palmer, he was, he was big throughout he was Bo Bassett before Bo Bassett, right? And so I think he has a uniqueness about him. I don't necessarily disagree with the other two. I think Kyle Dake is somebody who's very capable of taking over a program. I would be interested which one. I think if Jordan Burroughs is going to the college coaching circuit, he's going to Nebraska. I think there's no reason why he wouldn't be at Nebraska. I think the donors would just not want anybody other than Jordan Burroughs to be the coach at Nebraska. So I would have a hard time believing that he wouldn't end up there if that's the case. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I definitely think that you're going to see that. I think you're going to see coach turnovers a little bit quicker. And again, I don't know if it's always a bad thing. Sometimes it's bad, but the world that we're in right now, you've got to have many hats on as a leader of a program in college sport and college wrestling specifically. And yeah, like I said, for good or for bad, I think coaches are going to be changing over pretty quickly. So,
and I think that's the David Taylor effect. You have this guy that had limited, no coaching experience, and other than sitting in a corner here or there, but took over this program and look at what he's done, and he's developing guys, and he brought Thomas Gilman with him, and to your point, Jimmy Kennedy, and he brings those guys, and they have a strong wrestling background. I mean, if you go back and look at that Wyatt Hendrickson match, I would even tell you that even their trainer, who jumped 6 feet off the ground when Henderson got that 3, he's part of the whole success story too. Was a great pitcher to have him. But yeah, the landscape of wrestling is changing for better. And this weekend was just a great way to cap it off, and so exciting of all the things that happened. Two people too that we didn't mention on the broadcast, but would like 2 other Illinois All-Americans. Josh Corderhout, we mentioned briefly, from Navy. I call him Little Colot because he wrestles a lot like Kerry does, right? Has that mean crusher and kind of similar styles. And then speaking of styles, Ethan Styles, he comes back, has a great tournament. All-Americans, gets on the backside, suffers a few losses, but he All-Americans it that way too. So like you said, 9 All-Americans. But I think based on the landscape of Illinois wrestling, you'd hate to say, hey, this was the top, but I think there's more room for improvement. There's a couple guys that didn't wrestle this year. I mean, a Ben Davino comes to mind. There's one that could be right there, and some other guys. So I think this is just the start and the build of the finally of all those Fargo guys becoming All-Americans. We got rid of that stigma. Great job by Illini and Lucas Byrd to get that national champion and put that stamp of approval. And, Lucas, you look great with that eye block on it, and I can't see you with anything else on it. So I hope that means something.
Yeah. Well, I think you sealed that up great. I think it was a great weekend for wrestling. Great stuff. I do think we'll find topics to talk about this off season. Obviously, they will be wrestling somewhere, whether it's in freestyle circuit. U.S. Open's coming up in April. Whether or not they're wrestling or not, there's a lot of speculation that we're going to get into. And I do think we should have those conversations around what it would really take to make in-state kids stick around and let people know that it's not as simple as just having the loyalty of the state, so there's a lot to it. So Brian, thanks again. Anything else? Last words? What do you got?
No, I mean, the state of wrestling's in a good spot. And like I said, great way to end it. And we're always going to have stuff to talk about on the college version of Illinois wrestling. We plan on doing it either bi-weekly or weekly, and we're going to keep doing it. If Northern Illinois you're watching, Northwestern, we're coming after you guys. We want to talk to you. But the state of Illinois is great. Dalton, you bleed it. I appreciate you having me on and having the vision to have this podcast. I'm looking forward to it.